Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the 2024 Kawasaki Z900RS Cafe model. And full disclosure, I own the SE version of this bike. We're going to talk about some of the differences, but because I own that bike, I've received a lot of questions about it. And in this video, what we're going to do is talk about some of the myths, some of the confusion, and specifically talk about who these bikes are for. And because we have the Cafe version in front, I'm going to talk about which body or riding position I like the best. In the link of the description is a YouTube short that will show you the difference in riding position between this and the standard model. So it's a one I've done about a year ago versus my bike versus this, and that'll give you a sense of which one's better. We're also going to talk about, is this a better value than the SE model? And full disclosure, I think it is for most people. So what we're going to do is clear all that up, but I'm filming here, of course, at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, Jim Gilbert's Power Sports. This is the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country, and they give me complete access to their entire vehicle lineup. So if you have questions that I don't get to in this video, make sure you let me know in the comments, and make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll make sure I come back to this again and again. And like I said, we'll have riding reviews and all kinds of stuff of my own personal bike, which is very similar to this on the channel. I've already got some up. We're going to do a bunch more as well. All right, let's get going with this review. So the biggest reason to buy the Cafe version of this bike is right here. It's got this unique cowl out front that looks like the 70s bikes, and really that's what it is. It's style more than function. That's one thing to remember. Some people say, hey, I want a lot more wind protection, but if you look at the angle of this, it is giving you some height over the gauges to give you a little bit extra wind protection, but at the end of the day, this is mostly a naked bike with a style piece on the front more than a wind protection. It does not have an adjustable windshield. Now, there may be options out in the aftermarket that I'm not aware of that can sort of flip the lip up on this and give you a little bit more wind protection, but this is basically style. So the rest of the bike is essentially the same, but because it has this cowl, a lot of people have asked me, does this cowl fit on some of the other bikes? And the short answer is, I'm pretty sure it doesn't. The handlebars are a tiny bit thinner on this, and they have a different shape, and they put your body in a different position to allow clearance when it's at full lock of the windshield area here, or the cowl area. So it is a cowl that's specific to this model because of the handlebars and other things. You'd have to modify a few more things to make it fit your non-Cafe version. It also has a couple kind of unique style things, but we're going to talk about the function of this. So let's start at the front wheel, work our way through the engine, talk about the seat, which is also different, and go work our way over the gauges, and we're going to make sure that you know if this is right for you. So taking a look at the front wheel of this bike, you start to figure out the manufacturer's intent, but in this case, it's a little bit misleading. Kawasaki advertises the Z900, in other words, not the RS, not the retro sport model. The Z900 they advertise as sort of the sport version, and this one's a little less sporty, but you have a couple things that are a little bit more sporty here. So first of all, you have the radial mount calipers here, which is this sort of design here. It's a very stiff design. You have the upside down forks, and these are fully adjustable as well. So compared to something like the SE model, which is the step up, now we're sticking back to whether it's the Z900 SE or the Z900RS SE, so retro sport or regular, you actually have quite a bit of adjustable suspension compared to the base models. You have the stronger situation here. The SE model is the only other ones that have the radial mount calipers, which in the SE models, whether it's the Z900 or the Z900RS SE, they have Brembo brakes, but you still have essentially a better mounting position than the standard Z900, and you have the upside down forks that are fully adjustable. So that's a big upgrade. So that hints at a more sporting character, and really that kind of is a more sporting character than something like the Z900, which has more sporty styling. So you've got great brakes here, disc brakes, you've got the ABS ring on the other side that you can't see, so of course you have ABS. There's also traction control. Now, a couple things I want to show you. Let's see if it's in the shot right now. We're going to scroll back just a little bit. The fender here is a little short, and that's probably done for style reasons, which means if you love the look of these pipes, which we'll show you in a second, they are going to get covered, they are going to get a little more grimy, and I put a radiator guard on my bike just to avoid anything going right into here off the wheel, and I think that's paid off for me. You can see a little bit of marks up there, but no issues with that. So that's one thing. You can get aftermarket pieces down here, but throw a radiator guard on there, and you've got some of the problems solved. Let's move around to the engine, because there's a lot of differences with the engine on this bike that I think people kind of gloss over. All right, so let's start with the basics and move our way to some of the more complicated things. First of all, the basics. This is the Z900RS. It's a retro style name. It's actually a 948cc. So a lot of names overrate the bike. Think of the Ninja 500, it's actually a 451. In this case, they underrate the bike. So it's Z900, it's a 948cc engine. The best I can tell is it's the same basic block used in the Ninja 1000, but there are a number of changes in there. What that means is you have a 4-cylinder, super smooth engine, but in the RS model, so in this retro sport model, it is detuned from the Z900. Now I say detuned because that's what a lot of people say. I like to say retuned, having owned this bike, because while the Z900 has a little bit more, it revs a little tiny bit higher and it has more power at the top end, this one actually has more power in the mid-range, and you get more torque in the mid-range, and you have peak torque 1,000 RPM lower. What that means is this is way better. In theory, especially, at least in my opinion, it's way better for on-the-road type riding. If you go to the racetrack, you're going to be sitting in that top end of the rev range all the time. If you stay on the road, on a 950cc bike, you are not staying in the top end of the rev range no matter what you're doing. So that means mid-range power is where it's at, and this thing has so much pull and the horsepower to go. So it pulls hard from about 4,000 RPM, which is, basically right where the gearing sits, and it pulls harder. Now they have some other changes in here as well. The flywheel is about 12% heavier than the Z900. That means when you're shifting, you have that little bit more rev hang, which is what you want on the road, not necessarily what you want on the track. Basically makes for a smoother power delivery rather than a more frenetic power delivery. And then you also have a different first gear and a different sixth gear. So you're accessing that torque down low. It's a lower end first gear and a taller sixth gear. So what that means is it gets off the line great, but it also revs a little bit less on the highway. Now that doesn't mean that you can't pass on the highway, because remember that peak torque is 1,000 RPM lower, so you still have all that peak torque even though you're in sixth gear, and that's what makes this kind of a unique bike, and in my opinion, a better road bike for what it is compared to the Z900, which sacrifices a little bit of track performance. So that's a controversial opinion, but I think that's the way, if you look at how everything's designed up in there with the different first and sixth gear, the torque delivery being more in the mid-range, everything else being in there, I think it's a perfect road bike. Now there is controversy, we'll talk about that. Let's talk about some of the controversy that some people feel that I disagree with. So let's talk about the controversy with this bike. Well, if you look at the motorcycling press, a lot of them have a lot of access to bikes. They can drive all kinds of things, and they want this to be a little more frenetic than it already is. Now, I want to be clear, this thing has tremendous power, but it builds very smoothly, and to me, that makes it more enjoyable to ride on the road. To be fair, we know it's detuned for horsepower. We know it's got quite a bit of catalytic converter to meet emission standards on there, so you can get more out of this bike. In my opinion, that's not what this bike is about. This bike has all the power that most people are going to need, and unless you're, if you're in the press, like the motorcycle press, then you might want to toy with this bike. But if you're not in the motorcycle press, you're probably looking at a different bike if you want to get a whole bunch more horsepower, unrestricted, that kind of thing. So in this form, I think for most owners, they're going to be completely thrilled with it. Now, we talked about that catalytic converter down the bottom. You can barely see it from this angle. You can see it a little bit more from the other angle. That goes into what Kawasaki has termed a sound-tuned exhaust, which is one of a very few bikes in their lineup that is actually tuned to sound good. When it starts up, it has a nice low rumble. When you rev it out, it really has that 4-cylinder kind of, bark, sort of aggressive kind of growl to it, as well as that high revving sort of super bikey type feel. Now, it stays a little more bassy than the true super bike type stuff, but it definitely has a loud, and when I say loud exhaust, it's loud at revs, but not too loud at idle, which means it's kind of a nice sound to it. They do a good job. So this bike is all about how it feels. And if you want to have fun, you want the feeling of fun. You don't need to have the absolute top performance, which you'll be so far beyond the speed limit to actually access. This bike gives you fun at any speed and a tremendous amount of power. So we have that in place. Now we should also talk about, compared to the Z900, so the non-RS, and compared to the other Z900RSs, this Cafe model, although it has a different cowl, also has a different seat. It kind of curls up here, and the back is smooth. We'll show you the seat in one second, but that does give you a little bit different seating position. So the seating position, like I said, there's a link in the description that'll show you that exact seating position. What I find is the seat height is very reasonable, but on this bike, no matter which version you get, the foot pegs are kind of semi in your way. So I like to be just in front of the foot pegs to go straight down, and then I'm easily flat footing. I'm about a 6-foot rider, so you know, if you're a little bit shorter than me, you still should have no issues with this. But in the seating position, we did discover that the pegs are the exact same spot on either model you get, but the handlebars are a little bit forward. Now, a lot of people seem to think that if you're leaning forward, you're going to be less comfortable. In my opinion, the difference between a little bit lean forward and a little bit lean back is very similar. I do feel like this has a little bit sportier feel. I've ridden some sporty bikes and then immediately got back onto my bike, which has a higher handlebars, and my bike feels a lot more like an adventure bike seating position, where this one is kind of a cross between a little bit sportier and you know, still a lot of comfort. So you have this as your seating position here, quite comfortable, and your passenger still has a nice wide seat, but they will sit a little higher on this bike, in my opinion, than they do on the other RS models. So if you have a passenger along, they're a little shorter than you, this may be an advantage to them, but you could try both bikes out to see which one works best for you. So I do want to show the seat up close here, because this is similar to the other Z900RS models, but then it kicks up a little bit more. The other one does have a kick up, but it doesn't always show you the kick up just because the fabric on top, or the material on top, kind of levels it a little bit, but it does have a bit of a kick up. This one is certainly more of a kick up. So if you're in that tuck position, this is going to hold you in place a little bit better. It gives you more of that sporty feel. And back here, the other model has sort of this rib section all the way back. This one is a little bit more smooth. So again, it's just styling. Whether you're taking 2 people or not, it should be fully comfortable here. The other thing that I like about this is, I always like, if you're going to put something on the back here, to have that softer area rather than just pure plastic. So what you have here is a tie down here, you can see that, and there's another one down here, which is, you know, allows you to set a net or whatever you wanted to set down, a bag, other kinds of things on the tail, which to me just fits better on this bike than something like a tank bag on that stylized tank. So it's just, you know, sort of the way we used to do things. But the other thing it does is, if you are mounting luggage, a lot of people have aftermarket luggage type thing on this. You have some mounting points to work with, and a lot of the aftermarket luggage does work with that. We're going to show you just a little bit of this duckbill rear end here, and then we're going to talk about a little bit of the controversy with the lighting in North America, and then we're going to work through to the controls. So a couple things I like here. First of all, turn the bike to the on position, and we'll get that tail light lit up there. Oh, we got the signal light on, so let's turn that off there for a second. We'll get to the signals in 1 second. So a couple things I like here. The tail light on this angle looks kind of washed out. It's not that dim. But it does have this sort of unique kind of styling that they used to have in the 70s. A couple things I like. It has an LED light down here on your license plate, so you have the nice white light on your license plate. And those of you who like fender illuminators, this is not that big, which is something I like. A lot of bikes have a huge fender on there, so in my mind, you don't have to illuminate the fender to keep the look, and that works fine. Now, the signal was on earlier. Let's just turn that one on again. One thing I don't love about the North American bikes, which doesn't make sense to me, but maybe it works on this bike, is some of the 900s, in fact, all the Z900s and the Z900RSs, they all have incandescent lights here on the signals in North America. In other parts of the world, they have LED lights, so you can sort of you know, get the upgraded lights in there, but we have the incandescent ones. Now, on this retro one, it may work, but again, this is retro modern, and I would have liked to see full LED everywhere. Doesn't have it, probably doesn't affect it. They are very bright, but they're not LED, which is a little bit odd. Before we move to the dash, I want to show you the rear suspension here. So, of course, you've got your lay-down backlink suspension, the sort of the typical sport model. Again, this is a fully sport bike. It's not all retro where you would have like the double shocks on the side either over here. Everything is moved forward, so the weight centralization is very good. What that means is it handles really well. But I have the SE model, and the SE model is known for its adjustable Öhlins shock. Now, I want to be clear, this shock is still preload adjustable. You can see that right there. It still has compression adjustability, still very adjustable. The one thing it doesn't have is the remote preload that you get off of the SE model right here. So although the other one is an Öhlins shock, which is probably an improvement, you can play with this and make it sort of set up exactly the way you want it to. And the same thing goes for the front suspension. The SE does have modified suspension settings over these standard models like this one, Cafe, and the regular RS models, but these are fully adjustable forks as well, so you can tweak that front suspension and get it pretty close to where you would want it, even if you don't have the higher end Öhlins shock on the rear. All right, so we're just about to take a look at the gauges here, which are super cool on this bike. One of the great reasons to buy this bike. But on this Cafe model, I'll try to show you through the windscreen here. You do have a cool little badge, Z900RS badge in there that just adds a little bit more flair, makes it a little bit more special. And again, because the suspension adjustment is kind of hidden behind the windshield, I'll try to get to it closer here. I just pulled it out of frame. You can kind of see it at the bottom of the screen here. Let's kind of zoom right in there. You can see the upper suspension adjustment. Now that's of course on both fork tubes there, so a lot of adjustment to make this suspension exactly the way you want. All right, so we're fully wide angle here to show you just sort of the bend of the handlebar before we dig into the dash there. And like I said, it is a little bit thinner tube here than on the Z900RS SE model that I have. This one's black, I have a chrome model, so there are a couple styling differences. Again, seating position not drastically different, but a little bit more leaned over, and that's really the difference between the two. So that's why you can't right away go from this on the other models. If you want this cowl here, you got to go with the Cafe model. So let's zoom right in here. Maybe that's a little too close. Let's come out like that. And you have these gorgeous gauges. Now, I think these look far better in person than they do on video, but let's turn them on and get them going. You get that full sweep when you turn on. So you have this fully modern looking dash. Let's turn that signal light off again. Keep leaving that on. And you can see that one thing I like is both speedometers and tachometers on digital gauges are often either fully digital or they crunch numbers together, and you have this linear feel to it. There's something about regular gauges that are still the best to read, and these ones are super clear. They look great at night as well, as the white LEDs behind them shine through. So you have that traditional font, but you also do, you have something that in my mind is just easy to read, very pleasing to look at, and not so busy. This is not an intimidating dash in any way. Some bikes have a lot of settings and stuff that's really intimidating to work with, but you kind of lose that visual appeal. So this whole bike is about style, and these gauges really work well with that. Now you don't lose anything in functionality in here. You have a fairly simplistic system down here. So let's just show you the trip A. We'll cycle through there on the very bottom. It says trip A. There's your odometer. There's your outside temperature. Then you have your range, which it'll calculate as you're driving. So you can actually increase your range by just the stated range just by driving a little bit more efficiently there. Average is 5.3 liters per 100 kilometers. That, again, this has been driven for 1 kilometer. I'm sitting in the 5s. I can get in the 4s, obviously, if you really dig in the power. And this is, actually, that's kilometers per liter. I do liters per 100 kilometers. So again, fuel efficiency can be very good on this bike if you're easy, but obviously if you want to open it up, you're going to eat a little bit more fuel. But again, I find my efficiency can be quite good for what it is. And then there's kilometers per liter, your instant. So you have instant and average, and it's listed in kilometers per liter. You can do liters per 100 kilometers, miles per gallon US, miles per gallon UK, all of that stuff is there. Then there's trip B, trip A, and back to odometer. The other things you have here is a temperature gauge on this side here and a fuel gauge that's identical on that side there. So clean looking dash, your gear indicators in the middle, clock is always visible. You'll have a little warning light up top, which will tell you what's going on there. And then you can change your traction control by hitting the set button there. So it's the KRTC, let's just zoom all the way in there. See the flashing number there? I can change it from off, back to 1, back to 2, and that's it. Now to me, that's all you need on a bike like this. I always drive with mine in 1. It will intervene when I'm super aggressive, but it's not a intervention that really throws you off or anything like that. It's a very comfortable intervention. You can see the little traction control light flash, but a lot of time you see it more than you feel it or hear it. You do have enough power here to require traction control even on dry pavement, especially if you're getting aggressive with it. But again, that traction control level 1 works great. I use level 2 when it gets wet. And if you want to turn it off, you have that ability as well, so you can do some wheelies and other kinds of stuff. So really simple bike, simple system, but it also makes it clean, and it focuses just on the riding pleasure. And that's kind of where I'm headed with why this bike is so good. But let's look at the controls before we wrap up and talk about why this bike is great. So again, a lot of rider-centric things on here. Part of this will be sort of because it's retro, there's less controls here, but part of it will just be rider-centric. It's about enjoying the motorcycle for the motorcycle, not all the technology. So you do have a little thing, a little trigger right there by my finger there, which is to flash your high beam. It is a full LED headlight there, so you can flash that high beam to get people's attention, to pass, whatever you want. And then you also have your regular high beams there, signals, horns, and four-way flashers right there, or hazard lights if you want to call it that. So again, everything's right there. This is what I was adjusting to move that lower, the odometers, the fuel efficiency, that kind of thing, just moving this up and down. And then the select button is how you select, you activate the traction control. You just select it, and then you can choose your levels up or down from there. So super simple controls to work. You already know where they are. You can almost do everything blind. You just glance down, you know where it is. And that's a big advantage to some of these more higher displacement bikes. They end up with all this technology because they feel like they have to charge for this technology. And in reality, it's not something that makes your bike easier or better. So again, simplicity is a key, but you do have a couple nice things as well. Adjustable clutch lever and brake lever, which can adjust for longer or shorter hands, but can also adjust for exactly where you want that bite point to be on the clutch or the brake, which is really nice as well. So super simple controls. We'll just zip straight across in the same shot here. We'll go a little bit wider angle, come across, and we'll look at the start button and the kill switch, which is kind of one thing I like. They do have this on other bikes, but most of the Kawasaki bikes are a bright red here and a little bit brighter gray here. These almost look like retro faded in the sun to me, and on this bike they really work. Now it's not the only the retro bikes that have this color. A couple other bikes do as well, but it just kind of works well on this bike. It kind of shows that it's retro-ish, and some people wonder how old the bike is because some of these things are sort of that older color as well. So let's talk about who this bike is for. Well, first of all, because I bought the SE version of this bike, it's for me. And what I liked about it is this is a fully modern sport bike underneath with a much more comfortable seating position. The style is also pretty cool. It's kind of a timeless style. If you have a really modern sport bike, it's gonna look out of date in about 5 years as they update that. But something like this is gonna stay cool to a lot of people. So that's one key piece. The other thing is that gives you a lot of stiffness here. So you have a firmer ride that you can drive. Instead of being like a retro bike that's soft, you can ride it like a sport bike. The other thing it does is it allows you to soften the suspension yourself and soften it up and be a great all-day cruiser. It's a comfortable riding position. You can take a passenger if you want. You've got all the power you need, but you can soften it and be the cruiser that you want. To me, it's not a racetrack bike. You can take it to the racetrack if you have the intention of doing that, but what it really is a really great road bike. If you look at the way they geared this bike, that 6th gear, that's a taller gear, but moving that torque down lower in the rev range so you really have the same torque but lower. All it does is give you power everywhere on the streets, and unless you're only riding at the top end of the revs, which you never are with a bike like this on the streets, you end up with something that's really, really, really good for the streets. It's comfortable, it's sport bike-like. You could improve the tires to have a really sticky sport bike feel, but they're fine for what they are for the first set, and you've got the technology and look of a modern bike, look of a retro bike. It doesn't have everything that a fully modern bike might have. It doesn't have a quick shifter. It doesn't have stuff like that. But to me, it's about rider enjoyment, being involved in your ride. And that's what this does great. It gives me the joy of riding that I used to have on my original bikes with all the power, handling, and just overall great package of a modern bike. So if that sounds like you, this bike's sitting for you. Right now, there's 2 of them sitting here, late summer, early fall at Wheels and Deals. Right here, so you can check them out at Jim Gilbert's Power Sports. And if now's a good time to buy them on sale as well. It's the same bike as it was early in the year, just a little bit cheaper right now. So it's a good time to pick it up. That's what I did. I bought mine in the middle of winter. It was ready to go in the summer. So if that sounds like you, check them out, and we'll talk to you in the future.